Like, why did you join the organization? What attracted you?
Yeah, I came to AppHarvest because of the mission, and pretty much anyone here you ask that, you're going to get the same response: mission, purpose, believe in what the company is trying to do. And most of my career had been automotive. And so I had worked in automotive around the world, including France, including Japan. And at the height of COVID, this company that I had never heard of reached out and said, "Hey, the CEO would like to talk to you." And I'm like, "What? What is this all about?" And so he called, and the first thing he said to me was, "I hear you're Appalachian." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I am. And what does that have to do with what you have to ask me?" And he said, "Let me tell you what I'm trying to do for Appalachia, because AppHarvest is a B Corp. It is organized. It's a public benefit corporation. And so while we're trying to farm more sustainably, getting far more produce using far fewer resources, we're also trying to create good jobs in Central Appalachia." I grew up in East Tennessee, so that was a mission that really appealed to me.
Yeah. And can you share just a little bit of the origin of the organization too? Because I think that's a pretty fascinating story too. And I'm sure that was probably part of those early conversations, was hearing where the idea came about. What was the problem you were setting out to solve? It's a good story. I'd love to hear it again.
Yeah, you bet. So our founder and CEO is a fellow named Jonathan Webb. Jonathan had gotten into renewable energy and was overseeing some of the largest renewable energy projects, particularly solar installations for the Department of Defense in the Southeast. So when he was in DC at that point, energy resilience was what everyone was talking about. And so he started digging a little bit deeper, and he said, as important as energy is, civilization crumbles quickly when you don't have a reliable food source. And so food security was much more top of mind for a lot of areas of the world. And a lot of people had taken the US food security situation for granted for a long time. So the more he dug into it, he found out that the Netherlands, of all places, which has a geographic size of about eastern Kentucky, is one of the top exporters of food in the world. And how the heck do they do that? They do it through greenhouse technology. And so we're not talking, necessarily just like hoop houses that are plastic, covering dirt and extending the season a little bit. These are what we refer to as controlled environment agriculture facilities. So he took that idea, did it at a US sized scale with the latest technology, and that was the genesis of AppHarvest.
I think that's something that most people, I certainly didn't know this, of basically how far, I mean, I should say how far we are behind in terms of that type of growing technology. I mean, the country you just mentioned has you know, what is the difference? I mean, it
Yeah.
is not even close, right?
Yeah. So Europe right now, so it's estimated that the United States has maybe about 6,000 acres under glass. So we just quadrupled our farm network last year, and so we've got about 165 of those acres. But you compare that to Europe. Europe has more than 500,000 acres under glass. So we're significantly underbuilt based on that. And so what was the impetus for the Netherlands to do this? And it was World War II. During World War II, their supply lines got cut, and a significant percentage of their population starved, and they made it a national priority to say, we will be able to feed our own population if anything like this happens again. And so they started developing this high-tech greenhouse technology that we have adopted.
When you, in conversation with folks, does that come up? Do you bring that up? Because, they may say, well, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. There's no precedent for this. We haven't seen this before. And you're like, no, there is. I mean, is it a useful comparison?
Yes, it is. When you're able to say, hey, this isn't some wild cockamamie idea that hasn't been proved out. It is something that's been proved out over generations in Europe. So it's something that we're doing with the latest technology, and we're doing it at a significantly larger scale for the most part. But this is basic technology transfer that we were able to take from the Netherlands that has been proved out already.
Yeah. So why Appalachia? I mean, you could do this in a number of places. Why is that the ideal spot for your team?
So, a number of advantages to Appalachia. Number one, Jonathan Webb is from the area and he wanted to do something that could create jobs in an area that really needed them. So, our farms are in some of the most economically distressed counties of Appalachia to create opportunity. There's also a geographic advantage because Central Appalachia is within 70% of the US population within about a day's drive. That was one of the things that made coal so successful in Kentucky. Not just that they had deposits, there were lots of areas of the United States that had deposits, but that they could transport it to major urban centers efficiently and quickly. And so when you're talking about a perishable good like fruits and vegetables, there are many advantages to being able to get that out as well. So in some cases, we can pick it, pack it, have it on grocery store shelves within about a 24-hour period.
No, that's great. And I think last time we talked, you mentioned the water source too. That another component?
Yes, with changing weather patterns, as some of our traditional growing areas in the United States, like the extreme Southwest, get drier, there are other areas like Central Appalachia that are getting wetter. So we tend to have really good precipitation, and we work first with Appalachian sunshine and Appalachian rainwater. So we have these huge roofs that are glass, so we take as much solar as we possibly can. That's a special technology so that the glass is diffused so that each plant gets its fair share of light. And then that same roof captures rainwater. Our flagship farm is in Morehead, Kentucky, and that's a 60-acre farm. And it has a retention pond that is the size of 70 Olympic swimming pools. I think for every 2 inches of rain we get, we collect about 1 million gallons of water in that pond.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing operation to think about. I mean, your background is, you can basically see the operation, and I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking, man, there's so much that goes into it. What were some of the like big hurdles to get past in kind of the early days? Because this is not a capital light endeavor, right? Like there's going to be a lot of capital involved in it. There's going to be a lot of different factors to evaluate. Like what were some of those big hurdles that you're proud to say that you've cleared or are clearing to this point?
Right. These are high-tech indoor farms, and they're massive if you get an opportunity to look at them. So, and we have pretty good images, video and photography if you go onto appharvest.com and take a look. And so the construction, COVID hit us during the construction of the very first farm. So that was a challenge, but it was a challenge that's another benefit of being in Appalachia is access to a workforce that has the tenacity and the faith and the grit to get big projects like this done and not to stop. So we were able to move through that, but they are capital intensive. And so these are big construction projects. When Morehead opened, I believe Morehead was in the top 10 buildings by volume in the world. So that's the type of size that we're talking about here. And then we quickly moved from just that one farm into constructing 3 more farms that we got opened just last year in 2022.
That's amazing. It's amazing. It's a huge, I mean, yeah, it's just a huge undertaking, and it's working, right? It's what are some of those like success measures that you use to kind of evaluate like, hey, this is working? I mean, you've mentioned a few. I mean, not just what you grow and the efficiency of that, but also the jobs you're providing. I mean, what is success in your guys' book?
Yeah. So based on United Nations reports, they think that we need to grow about 50 to 70% more food by 2050 to meet the demands of a growing population. So right now, 70% of all fresh water already is dedicated to agriculture.
Hmm.
That means we would either need a second planet Earth to be able to fill those needs, or we're going to have to learn how to grow far more with far fewer resources. So this method allows us to use about 90% less water than open field agriculture because we use a closed loop irrigation system. That also allows us to do precision dosing of nutrients. So where open field agriculture tends to apply a lot of fertilizer, we can use a fraction of what's required and really monitor it and make sure that it circulates through the system until the plants need it and it's actually used. Some of the most noxious greenhouse gases come from overproduction and overapplication of fertilizer in open field environments, which then can leach into the freshwater systems, making them less usable for other needs as well. So those are some of the advantages we have. We also can do a lot of production on a relatively small footprint. So even though this building is giant, we can get about 30 times the production out of it compared to the same amount of open field agriculture land. And we can do that year round. So now we very much, we love our soil farmers. We believe they absolutely are needed. It's just that we're going to have to produce so much food over the next couple of decades that we're going to need every tool in the arsenal to be able to meet those needs. And the U.S. currently is relying on about 2/3 of its fruit and vegetable production being imported. So we saw an opportunity not only to make a more resilient domestic food system to ensure food security, but also an opportunity to create jobs and to create an agricultural hub here in Central Appalachia that could compete nationally and internationally.
Yeah. When you're talking with people, are they surprised to learn about the level of import that we rely on right now? Or is that a surprise, or do they expect that?
I think most people have no idea. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really going to require a lot more consumer education and a consumer movement to really change this. So we engaged in a thought leadership campaign that we called Fight the Food Fight. And it really challenged people to say, hey, when you sit down with your families tonight, take a look at your dinner plate and ask, do I know where this food came from? Do I know the effect its production had on people and planet? Did they pay fair wages? Did they treat the soil the way it should have been? Did they use more water than was necessary? How many food miles did it actually travel to get to my plate? Do I know what kind of pesticides were used in this production? So people started to get more familiar with their food during COVID because they had the time to. They were staying in, they were cooking on their own, they were paying more attention to ingredients, they started to read some labels. And so then, so people did start to develop more of an appreciation, but we're really just scraping the surface for where we need to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there is a group of people who care about every factor you just mentioned, where it's from, the wage, the miles traveled, but it's still a very small percentage right now. But they exist, and they are starting to create enough noise that people are coming up with certifications and different things to be able to communicate that to where a bit larger percentage of customers and buyers will start to pay attention to those things. So I do think it's coming. And it just needs to get easier for people to learn. Right now, you have to like really sit down and read a handful of books to like grasp the understanding of it, right?
Yeah. And I think we deal with a lot of latent fears in this category too, because when you go to the grocery store and you bring home your fruits and vegetables, what's one of the first things you do before you use them?
Yeah, wash them off.
Yeah. So, and everybody does that. And I think in the back of their mind, they really wonder, did I really, did I really do anything? Did I really get them clean? What was on them to begin with? And then you just suppress that because you think, I don't have any alternative. I did my part. I'm worried that it didn't make a difference, but I'm not going to think about it because I don't have an alternative. Well, you do have an alternative. You can support folks who minimally use any of those pesticides and
Yeah,
avoid the harshest chemical pesticides because they're growing in a different way, a more sustainable way.
that's great. So you mentioned that we'll go back to the Netherlands. You said they've been doing it since, basically World War II. They had a really strong reason, motivation to do it. So there has been basically the means to do this for decades. My assumption is that just in the most recent decade, that has probably really accelerated in terms of the different technologies that can be implemented. Is that right, or are you using technology that's existed for a long period of time, or are there some new things with whether it be fertilizer or pesticides or the light sources. I have no clue. I'm just spouting off stuff, but I'm
Yeah.
guessing that there's stuff that makes it so much more efficient to where you can get that 30x on what you're able to grow.
Yeah, there are advancements all the time. So, one of
Mm-hmm.
our big technologies is not necessarily anything newfangled. The closed loop irrigation system is a key enabler, but other things like the lighting. So, we start with nature first and then boost it with technology where we need to. So we use as much sunshine as possible. When we need to, we boost that with traditional and LED grow lights. Well, the LED grow lights are 40% more energy efficient than the traditional ones. And so there are developments like that that are making the opportunity to make these farming operations more sustainable all the time. Also, regarding automation, our tech team likes to call our flagship farm Moorhead a 60-acre robot because it's so highly automated. So our master growers can basically go in and say, hey, for this crop, I want it to be on this lighting schedule. I want it to be at this temperature. I want it to have this level of humidity. And so that can be programmed in. And there are 300 microclimate sensors throughout that particular farm that can constantly adjust and open windows and turn on lights and turn off lights to help achieve the ultimate outcome, because it's all about optimizing for plant health, which then optimizes production. And that's the big holy grail in agriculture, is being able to forecast what your production is going to be and what your quality of that production is going to be.
Yeah. I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that you've got partnerships or people are requesting partnerships with you because you've got this sort of technological playground that, has so much control versus, Mother Nature, where it's just wildly unpredictable. I mean, is that the case or?
Our founder and CEO started with a 17-member organization that had partners that were a combination of folks in the United States, universities specifically in Kentucky, universities in the Netherlands in this space, to facilitate the technology transfer, to be able to say, hey, we really want to create a full ecosystem here that supports one another. We also have engaged in something that we call growing the next generation of farmers and futurists. So we have supported 12 high-tech hydroponic classrooms in area high schools to teach students agriculture from the ground up. So they get these, what we refer to as container farms, that are retrofitted shipping containers with high-tech hydroponic equipment. So they learn everything from seeding to propagating the plant, to harvesting it, to deciding if they're going to sell it to their school system or sell it in a local health food store or contribute it to neighbors and other students in need, and then all the way through the culinary aspect too. So if kids aren't interested in agriculture, and many of them come from small farms where it's really hard to make ends meet and to make a profit, they may tell you they have zero interest in becoming a farmer or in agriculture. But then when they get introduced to this method of growing and they understand, wow, in this little container space, I can get the equivalent of 3 to 5 acres while I control it with my tablet or with my iPad, my iPhone. Then they're like, hey, I am interested in that. I'm interested in the tech part, or I'm interested in the marketing part. So we are just now starting to have some folks come, some students from that high school program, pursue degrees in agriculture and then come back and intern with us too.
That's awesome. I love how long-term of a vision that is, I mean, because as this grows, you're going to need, there's going to be demand for, people who can operate in that environment. And you're already starting at such a young age. I think it's fantastic. I mean, the truthful thing is I grew up in a farming community. If you were not inheriting land, you didn't have many opportunities to become a farmer. So in fact, the way things had developed, if you had interest, you couldn't almost. So this almost feels like it's a different avenue. It's a different avenue and a different method. And then what that really is accessible to anybody who has interest in it.
Yeah, lots of different types of opportunities within agriculture. And then it goes back to what we mentioned before. We're going to need every tool in the arsenal to be able to meet those needs.
Yeah. So what are you growing?
Oh, so we started with tomatoes because tomatoes are the number one import that comes into the United States out of Mexico. And then we expanded last year. And so now we have a salad greens farm. The salad greens farm can grow about 35 million lettuce plants at a time when it's fully ramped up. And those renew every 3 to 4 weeks. We have two tomato facilities, Moorhead and Richmond, which are basically a copy paste of one another. They can handle about 1.5 million tomato plants, and we handle a variety of different types from big beefsteaks to Campari to snacking tomatoes. We have a strawberry farm in Somerset, Kentucky, that can grow about 1 million strawberry plants at a time. Strawberries don't like it when it gets too hot in the summer, so we are alternating that right now with long English cucumbers. And so that's our diversified crop portfolio now.
That's great. So it sounds like some of these plants are able to grow year round, whereas otherwise that would, not be possible, right?
Yes, exactly. So for the tomato plants, we need to do a summer refresh. So when open field agriculture is coming online is when we tend to go offline and we start the new plants. So we do a complete refresh of the farm, start the new plants, and then they start to produce in the fall. And then they will run for about 10 months or so. But then things like the strawberries will run several months, and then we'll switch in the summer to cucumbers. But those can pretty much grow year round, and so can the salad greens in our Berea farm.
Okay, I'm an outsider to this. I don't fully understand, but just as a novice, I can think of three things of why that would be important. One, if you're growing constantly, you can constantly be tweaking and optimizing of the, inputs and that type of thing to get the best output. So you're learning faster than others would in a controlled environment. So that seems like a big advantage. Two, prices fluctuate based on the seasonality and availability of this food. And so that could potentially level off prices for consumers. And then three, I used to work in a produce section at a grocery store. There used to be a lot of like wax and stuff on plants and or vegetables and fruits because it was traveling from who knows where and needed to last for a long period of time. So there's potentially like that last step potentially could get to market a little bit quicker and not have to try to preserve it for so long in some cases where it's going to do that. So I mean that's my first thoughts on that. I don't know if that aligns with what you guys think about, but as I
Yeah.
hear it, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yes. You get an A plus. Every one of
Okay,
those is
good.
valid. And so those are all great reasons that controlled environment agriculture, CEA, is popular and is increasingly popular among some of the top national grocery store chains. We sell into the top 25 grocery store chains, also to some fast food restaurants and other restaurants and food service outlets. What they like about it is it diversifies their supply line. It shortens food miles for them. It's US grown, and then they get consistent quantity and quality
Yeah.
with that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Do
We
you
also
whenever
we're also able to operate in an environment that generally uses far fewer pesticides or chemicals,
yeah.
because we use a technique in controlled environment referred to as integrated pest management. So in a nutshell, it's using good bugs to take care of bad bugs. And we use what we refer to as human scouts to go out and look for any plant health issues or pest infestations to nip them in the bud when they're small so that you don't have to use as many harsh chemicals as some environments need to.
Yeah, I think that's important. Whenever you're talking with people and you're explaining what you do, I have a feeling if they haven't seen it, it's probably hard for them to visualize, and they're probably thinking of like small scale greenhouses or maybe vertical farming that they've heard about. Like, what are some of those misconceptions, or how do you like help them understand? No, this is really what AppHarvest is about.
Yeah, I usually ask them, who the best tomato whisperer in the room is, and then like you always have a few people who, even if they're in an urban environment, will grow tomato plants on their patio. So, So, I'm like, how many productive trusses do you have? How tall do your plants get? Most people say 3 to 5 feet. And so then I explain, okay, imagine nearly 750,000 of those plants on a single farm that are indeterminate. So they grow 10 months or so out of the year and get to be 30, 35 feet tall. That's what we're talking on the scale of difference.
It's amazing. Um, the journey that App Harvest has been on, it seems very accelerated to me as an outsider. It just feels like you've been able to accomplish so much in what seems like a very short period of time. And I mean, do you agree with that? Are you ever amazed at what you guys have already accomplished at this point? Like how would you how would you sort of classify the journey, or how would you describe the journey that you're on and where you're going?
Yes, it has been super accelerated. It's been really fast. And our CEO and founder, Jonathan Webb, is quick to attribute that to the region. We
Hmm.
had a region of folks who want to work for the enterprise and of folks in the region who want to support it. So we're really helpful in pushing through all of the permitting that was needed, all of the support, all the infrastructure that was needed to help get these farms up and running. And so it's really a tribute to the region saying we can do this.
Yeah, it's so true, because if you don't have participation there and people don't, it's everybody wants to debate it, it's nothing's going to happen, right? So you really do have to have kind of the lanes cleared in some ways for this to happen. So that is great. Do you, as you look forward, are there things on the horizon that you would predict or definitely know are coming, or that type of thing of like where you see this going, either for the industry or for App Harvest specifically?
Yeah, well, we really see controlled environment agriculture as needing to be the third wave of sustainable infrastructure. If you consider the first wave to be renewable energy, the second to be the popularization of electric vehicles, which is continuing now, really to address the United States food security issues, domestic food security issues, we see additional support for CEA and more CEA being leveraged as needing to be that next wave that everyone gets behind to help secure that.
Yeah. And do you feel like there's momentum there, or you're hungry for more momentum?
We're always hungry for more momentum. So we bit off a lot that we're working to chew right now by quadrupling the farm network just last year. So we're focused on core operations to get the 4 farm network to be as productive as possible. And then our original aspiration was to get to a network of 12 of these farms to really benefit from that scale. But we do see lots of opportunity out there. We do get asked, you brought up vertical farming a little bit earlier. We do get asked about the difference sometimes. And most definitions of vertical farming are black box or warehouse farming that are all artificial inputs, generally municipal water and 100% artificial lighting. And so we do benefit from having the hybrid of starting with nature first and then boosting it with technology and growing on a very large scale. A lot of those vertical farms are a few acres or a fraction of an acre versus the 165 acres that we have under glass right now.
Yeah. We know folks in vertical farming. It seems like a cool thing. The advantages, I guess, would be just proximity has got to be the biggest one. It almost seems to me, as again an outsider, that they get more buzz because of where they're located. It's, oh, that's happening here. That's almost unbelievable. Whereas what you're doing is like a whole different scale. Yet you still have proximity. It's not the same level of proximity, but also the
Right.
scale of what you're achieving is like completely different. So it almost seems like they get a lot of attention in the press just because where they're located. But what you're doing is it's a game changer in comparison, it seems like.
Yeah, you really nailed it. And again, it goes back to um, each of these applications has its purpose, and
Yep.
it's making sure that you're using the right one in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, Travis, for you personally, what's been the most rewarding part of being with App Harvest?
It's the story of the folks who are working with us.
Hmm.
It's not unusual, if I just go through the farm and chat with folks, to find people who used to travel an hour to the nearest city to do a hospitality job for maybe four
Yeah.
hours at a time. And then they come back and say, this is the first time I've ever had a job that I didn't have to leave home for, and that I had benefits. And some of these folks are 50 plus years old, and it's the first time that they have worked for a company that has been able to provide them benefits. So creating that type of opportunity with a longer term vision to try to make sure that this is a generational opportunity, that it's not a flash in the pan, but something that can really develop into a regional ecosystem for agriculture is the part that still tugs at my heartstrings.
Yeah. I mean, it really does seem like a full ecosystem, which, we talk to a lot of brands that are doing amazing things. But this is probably the most integrated in terms of where it is, what it's doing, and the benefit to everybody around it. It's really impressive.
We really try to hit the full spectrum on ESG, from the environmental, to the social, to the governance part.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm going to encourage everybody who's listening to check out AppHarvest, even out of just curiosity. Where would you say is a good place to point them?
Appharvest.com. And if you go to our media site, we've got some clips there from folks who have collected some great video and told some great stories for us. So that might be a good place to start.